So tell us about, Fast Flip. What's going on? What's the value,
Yeah.
to the publishers? What's the vision of Google News here?
Sure. I mean, well, Fast Flip was something when we launched it back in Google Labs in September or so with around 40 or so different titles. And actually just yesterday we sort of announced the second phase of that, where we pretty much doubled the number of publishers who are participating in it. So sources like Reuters and Bloomberg, US News and World Report, as well as most of the major newspaper companies in the States have all joined in, as well as a handful of UK publishers too. The goal of Fast Flip is really to begin to experiment with different ways of allowing people to consume news. And if you can sort of create a better experience, a more engaging experience, then people are going to consume more of it, and obviously there's opportunities on the revenue side of that as well. So that was sort of the premise that we went out with, to see if sort of the speed and the ability to really consume information online much in the same ways that you do offline. So flipping through pages, turning them one after the other without waiting for them to load, getting more of a visual browse. But ultimately, I mean, the idea is in the same way that you take any number of different Google tools, you can use them on Google, but we also tend to make these things open so that publishers can take advantage of them on their own site. Google Maps is probably, I'd say, one of the best examples of that. You obviously have Google Maps that people can come to Google and they can use that as well, but there's also an API. So publishers take advantage of the API, plug that in, layer their editorial on top of it, and that experience is on the publisher site.
So tell us a little bit about the living stories. That's pretty new. What is that supposed to? What is the user experience? What's the opportunity for the publishers? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I mean, this started through a series of different conversations. Obviously, we talked to a wide range of publishers on a daily basis, and in the course of some of the discussions we were having specifically with the New York Times and Washington Post, we both started thinking about, well, what does the future of news look like? I mean, how do you adapt the great journalism that these two institutions, as well as others, are producing every single day, and how do you adapt that for the web? And I think there's a feeling, I mean, not just within Google, but through a number of different publishers as well, that the way in which you're telling stories in the newspapers hasn't really been, we haven't taken advantage of the web and the ways in which you can use the online medium to tell stories in a fundamentally different way. Some of the ideas that we're looking at with the Living Story page is, number one, putting it all in one place. Instead of having these sort of discrete individual articles, thousands of different articles for the New York Times coverage of healthcare, or the Washington Post coverage of Afghanistan, the idea of a persistent URL really makes sense online. So you've got a single place for the user, for search engines, for people who are linking to that coverage, to find all the coverage in one place. So that's one aspect of it. The other is to sort of have sort of a personalized experience. If I'm reading the healthcare debate every single day, I don't need a lot of the background. I don't need sort of the context for it. I just want to know the latest quick updates. Conversely, if you're somebody who's sort of new to this and say, well, I know something's going on in Washington with healthcare and I want to check out what's going on, how do you cater to those different types of users? Now, right now, if you have a paper, you have no way of knowing who's reading it, whether it's somebody who's actively involved in the discussion or somebody who's there for the first time. Online, you have the ability to personalize that a lot more. So again, that's another concept that we're sort of testing out with the Living Story page. But it's really just playing around with the format for telling news. I mean, I think there are some interesting things that we want to test out and see how people respond to it. But it's an experiment. I mean, I think hopefully it contributes to the ongoing dialogue, not just with Google and the Post and the Times, but everybody who cares about journalism, to sort of think about how to take advantage of the web to tell stories online.